Oh my God, Lasca Hirlock. Minister, you're very, very welcome today, and I'm very glad to have an opportunity to speak about this topic. The deposit return scheme, to me, it's a concept that has potential to enable an entire a new way that people look at packaging and create a new positive habits for our country. It's a gateway to an entire new way of consuming goods and reimagining the concept of packaging. Some of us remember running around as children, lifting up the glass bottles we could find and selling them back to the shops, getting enough money to eat our weight in the macaroon bars and clove drops and cough sweets. And I have wonderful memories of picking bottles out of ditches, cleaning them and bringing them back to my local shop, where Mrs. Barry, who is now deceased, would take control of the transaction and look after us very eager and sugar-deprived children. But that model, irrespective of the motives back then, is very similar to the circular economy that we need to incorporate into our lives. And I know that you'll agree, Minister, that we need to be designing products that are intended to last. This country needs a drinks deposit return scheme that to be as ambitious as possible. And I understand that if it comes in a phased way, but I would urge that we give us those phases, the targets, and legislate for the targets. There needs to be clear timelines for the inclusion of glass, carton packaging, and a move towards digital return schemes where this enables the expansion of the model into a reuse model. The DRS should, in my opinion, should use a variable fee inclusive of all the materials, and this can be a powerful tool to improve recycling rates and make consumers think twice about the environmental impact of the product they are buying. Minister, I hope that our scheme has a variable rate fee and that would see containers allocated at a positive value based on the container size. A flat rate model could apply to a fixed fee to all beverage containers. Alupru, who I met with recently, highlighted that research shows that the possibility would cause an unfair advantage for plastic bottles, as many consumers would just not be willing to upfront the extra on the flat rate for, let's say, a 24-can multi-pack, and compared to the far cheaper 2-litre bottle. And it should be known, we should be looking at this, that packaging is not worthless. It should not be seen as waste, and we need to move towards a deposit return packaging for the reuse model, and only use the linear single-use recyclable model in the most limited circumstances. And I know that there will still be a need for single-use plastics. However, we need to reduce where practical, and always be incentivising companies to change to better products. Ireland is a small nation and has a huge opportunity to make our economy one of the best examples of a circular economy. And I am incredibly ambitious for this deposit return scheme. And I want this government to be bold and ambitious too. And I want people want modern, they want accessible, and they want a wide-ranging scheme. I had an interesting meeting with the Alliance for Beverage Cartons and Environment ACE Ireland recently to discuss this topic. ACE Ireland believe that digital or smart DRS should be examined alongside the conventional return to retail scheme. A digital DRS would ultimately prove more flexible, more adaptable system for widening the scope of acceptable materials. In order for less waste, we need to enable people to change. A digital system would result in a more user-friendly system where customers could access the scheme through placing materials in their mixed dry recycling bins collected at curbside. A digital DRS could also remove the burden on consumers to store used packaging materials in their homes and have to return them in bulk to shops or supermarkets during the next visit. I want people to change, Minister, but we need that help. We need it to be made easy, incentivise, encourage, create opportunities, and make that accessibility to have this new age Ireland circular economy. Use the technology, use our modern and ever upgrading technology to have that DRS scheme. And I know this, Minister, can't be happening overnight, but I know we can do it in the next 5 years if we are really ambitious.
And congratulations on your enterprising childhood. The equivalent in our area was gathering frogs, which we did. They were sold to the European market, I think.
Gosh, so, the poor
Minister.
frog.
Okay. Frogs. Thank you, Gahirlock, and thank you very much, Senator McGreehan. And indeed, you're absolutely right. I mean, your questions are excellent, and I think that for a lot of people, they do remember with some nostalgia that the fact that they could bring back, that they could return bottles and get money back in them. And just like you, I remember going to the local pub before I was of an age where I was allowed in and returning bottles and getting money for them. And there was a clear link, and it reduces the amount of litter on the ground. So, people understand that. They know that it's a good scheme, they know that it's worked in the past, and a lot of principles within the circular economy do involve a return to practices that our parents would have been involved in, like getting your clothes repaired and having your shoes fixed and so on and so on. So, you know, on the specific point of digital return, a digital return scheme, this is something that we have looked at and been lobbied on by the industry. And with that in mind, the regulations that we issued allow for a digital return scheme. So that it is actually possible within those regulations to allow for variable pricing. And I do understand the benefits that can come from offering different amounts of money depending on how recyclable a product is. And I can see what the advantages are. The challenge for me, though, is that such a scheme, as far as I'm aware, is not commercially operating anywhere, and I'm bringing in a scheme which will operate for 5 million people in one go, and I need to bring in something that I know is going to work. I know that the industry has carried out a pilot scheme in one area, and you know, which is absolutely you know, it's a good first step. I think there were 200 people involved, but remembering that I am bringing in a scheme for 5 million people. The programme for government marked a turning point in how Ireland approaches waste management and the circular economy, and instead of narrowly focusing on how we treat and dispose of the waste we produce, the government is committed to building a circular economy where waste is minimised, economic growth decoupled from resource consumption, and the value of goods and materials is retained in our economy for as long as possible. So reforming our use of plastic is one of the key measures outlined in the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy, and tackling our excessive use of single-use plastics is an urgent priority here in Ireland and across the EU. Under the 2019 Single-Use Plastics Directive, Ireland must achieve a collection target of 90% recycling for plastic bottles by 2029, with an interim target of 77% by 2025. So a report prepared for my department concluded that a deposit return scheme is the only feasible way to achieve the required level of performance under the Single-Use Plastics Directive. In September 2020, the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy set out a roadmap for the introduction of a deposit return scheme in the third quarter of 2022. And to deliver on this objective, a public consultation on the design of such a DRS was completed in 2020, and a working group of department officials and stakeholders was established to discuss the implementation of the scheme. This group met on a number of occasions, and arising from these discussions, a second public consultation focusing on the preferred model was completed early in 2021. The preferred model that emerged is based on a return to retailer in respect of plastic bottles and aluminium drinks cans. The beverage industry will fund and operate the scheme. The separate collection DRS regulations 2021 give effect to the outcomes of this policy development. They were published in November, and they provide the framework for the approval of a scheme operator. They introduce a requirement on producers to establish a DRS or to appoint a body to operate it on their behalf. That the deposit return scheme will apply to beverage bottles manufactured from PET plastic with a capacity of up to 3 litres, and beverage containers manufactured from aluminium or steel with a capacity of up to 3 litres. An application and approval process for the appointment of an approved body to operate the scheme, and the functions to be carried out by such an approved body, obligations required of producers, retailers and return points, and provisions relating to the deposit to be paid. So while these regulations represent a significant milestone in the introduction of a DRS, some important issues remain to be addressed in further regulations, namely some technical and transitional matters that required further consideration, including planning exemptions from DRS infrastructure and VAT matters, and the level of deposit zero rated in the November 2021 regulations, enforcement arrangements and some limited exemptions. The next milestone in the project is the appointment of an approved body to operate the scheme. And I understand from industry reps that in recent weeks a company was incorporated which will design and propose a deposit return scheme for my approval. While industry has noted that the time frame for introduction of Q3 2022 is ambitious, my department is monitoring progress closely. So I've allowed further time to consider the level at which a deposit should be set, and to consider matters such as whether the deposit should be variable and what provisions should apply to beverage containers sold as part of a multi-package, is the issue that you raised, and I take your point on that. However, as I stated, I will introduce further regulations prior to the introduction of the scheme to establish, among other things, the level of deposit for the materials to be collected. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Senator McGreehan.
Minister. Yes, I suppose I am, Minister. You know, the saying goes, I have a dream that that our waste, that our packaging should not be conceived as waste, that it is valuable, it is a valuable part of our economy, and that there is always a use for it. We spend so much money picking up, and our council's resources are at stretch so much in picking up rubbish. And I suppose it's not rubbish, it is a valuable product that we should always be utilising. And I really do think that we, and I would love to, and you have our support in Fianna Fáil, Minister, to push for a reuse model of packaging from, for all across our commercial and small businesses, with incentives and support, and just making it possible for consumers to change over. I think that you will have that buy-in by the people and by all consumers and businesses. We're on a bit of a wind of change here that I want to hold on to and make sure that we succeed in the lifetime of this government to bring in a really positive and really worthwhile, proper circular economy. I really look forward to it. It's a hobby horse of mine, Minister, and I'm a great champion for it.
Senator McGreehan, Minister.
Thank you, Oireachtas. And Senator, I can hear your enthusiasm. A lot of work was done by the department before I arrived, before I was appointed, and I have to give them credit for that, in engaging with the industry, not just the people making bottles, but the retailers themselves, right? And making sure that the scheme that was brought in was not a theoretical scheme that wouldn't work in practice or that people would be against. Part of that involved bringing those retailers to meet their equivalents in other countries where the scheme had been running for decades, and allowing them to directly say from one supermarket owner to another, what happens in practice, how does this work, how can we get this to work? Last week for St. Patrick's Day I was over in Spain, and I visited the person who's in charge of setting up this scheme in Spain, and is facing the same issues as us, although they're not as far down the road as we are. And the engagement part is the most important part, so that we're not bringing in a scheme that works in theory and doesn't work in practice. I think that we have the industry on side, we have the retailers on side, and we have the public on side too. So, you mentioned about litter during the pandemic. You wake up in the morning, you'd find the remains of picnics, and when the bars were closed and the people were out, not just young people, were leaving large quantities of cans and bottles in fields. That's not going to happen when they're worth money. Nobody's going to leave cash on the ground, and so it's going to be an immediate solution to that. And I'm expecting that the tidy towns groups will find that they not only will there be much less to pick up, but what they do pick up will be worth money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.